Hey guys, welcome back for another very exciting tutorial here at the PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com. My name is Jesus Ramirez. You can find me on Twitter at JR from PTC. So 2 weeks ago I saw the new Captain America Winter Soldier teaser poster and I immediately decided to use this as a tutorial. I originally wanted to put out this tutorial on our first anniversary, which was July 13th. It's hard to believe that it's already been a year since I put up my first tutorial. And I just want to take this opportunity to say thank you to all of you for the support. I really do appreciate it. Anyway, I spent a lot of time on this tutorial and I did not make the deadline, but I wanted this tutorial to really teach you how to achieve the effect in the original poster. I had to do it all with a time constraint and at a pace that you could follow. So I really had to think and come up with some interesting techniques that were not too difficult to achieve, but that generated great results. Without a doubt, I spend more time on this tutorial than any other. So if you've never commented on any of my videos, then please do so on this one. I would love to know what you think. This is going to be a long tutorial, but like I said, I wanted to achieve a fantastic final image. So I think the time that you'll spend will be worth it. I'm sure you'll learn a lot. Anyway, let's get started with the tutorial. The first step is to create the document we're going to be working with. So I'm going to go to File, New. I'm going to be working with a document that's going to be 1200 by 1775 pixels, and the background will be background color, which in this case is black. So I'm going to press OK, and it's going to create this document here. I'm going to use the guide plugin or extension that you've seen me use before. If you don't know how to use guide or you've never used it before, you can check out my how to design a magazine cover tutorial, and I go more into detail on how to use this extension. So I'm going to add 2 columns vertically and 2 columns horizontally. I'm going to press the GG button, and that's just simply going to create a center point for me. So it does it much easier than just clicking and dragging guides on your own. Anyway, so once I have my center point created, I'm going to go into my ellipse tool here, and I'm going to change the foreground color to this color here, 9D9998, which is this gray color you see here, and press OK. I'm going to click here in the center, click and drag, hold Alt or Option on the Mac to create the ellipse from the center, and if I hold Shift, it constrains it so we create a perfect circle. So I'm going to click and drag and create an ellipse that's about 1275 or so. And if you can't get the perfect number, that's okay. You can just leave it at whatever number you like, or you can come up here and change it by hand if you want to. So I'm just going to change mine to 1275, and if you have this little link icon selected, it'll constrain the numbers to both the width and height. So now I have my ellipse at 1275. I'm going to rename this layer to shield shape, which will be the shape of the shield, of course. And I'm going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder gray. And you don't have to do this, but I'm just going to select the color gray here so it colors the folder. So if I select green, it colors it green. So I'm just going to color coordinate the folders so I can work with them better, since we're going to have a whole bunch of layers. So I'm going to click on this shield shape and drag it onto the gray folder. I'm also going to control click or command click on the layer here to make a selection around that ellipse. Click on the folder and click on the folder mask icon to create a mask in the shape of the shield. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to work with a texture. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to click on this clean texture.psd. And by the way, all these files will be available at my website, PhotoshopTrainingChannel.com. Just look for this tutorial. If you're on my website, the link will be down below. If you're on YouTube, there should be a link that points to the page of my website where you can find these files to download. So this is one of the textures here, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this to create the shield, but this texture here in particular has too many rough spots, too many scratches, and it's rougher than I like it to be. So I want to clean up the texture and make it smoother. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the Spot Healing Brush tool, and I'm going to make sure that Content Aware is selected. check sample all layers, and I'm going to create a new layer. And I'm just going to click around the layer to remove those extra scratches and try to make the metal as smooth as possible. And I can use the bracket to make my brush bigger or smaller. I can simply click or click and drag. And I'm not going to take too much time to do this. I've already gone ahead and done that, so this is what the finished product looks like. And actually, if I shut off the original layer, you'll see what this tool does. So this is what I was working on that you saw me do, and this is what I did off camera. So that's going to save us a little time. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to press Control A to select all, Control Shift C to copy, and that's Command Shift C on the Mac to copy, and Command A to select all. Now that I've copied the smooth metal here, I'm going to paste it onto the composition here. So I'm going to press Control V to paste, and that pasted it inside of the gray folder, which is fine. And I'm going to rename it Metal Texture. And I'm going to convert this into a smart object by right-clicking on it and selecting Convert to Smart Object. Then I'm going to go into the smart object by double-clicking on it, pressing OK, and we're back with the metal texture. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to click on the top here and drag somewhere along here to give more contrast to that metal texture. I'm just going to close this tab and press yes to save, and you'll see the changes are applied to the metal texture in our composition. Then I'm going to click on the move tool, press Control T to transform, and I'm just going to center this texture to the circle, and I'm going to just rotate it a little bit because I want this highlight to be on the top right, since we're going to have a light source coming in from the top right. So this is already dark and this is light, so we'll take advantage of that. So we'll put that somewhere around there and then press OK. Then I'm going to add a Gaussian blur, so I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to do a blur of 0.7 pixels. Press OK. And I'm just going to collapse this so we have a little more room to work with here. And I'm going to set the layer opacity to 50%, like so. Then I'm going to create a new gradient fill. I'm going to double click on the gradient here so I can bring up the gradient editor. And I'm going to set the both colors to black. So that's one, and that's the other, and set them to black. Then this white stop opacity swatch, which is set to 0, which is makes it invisible. I'm going to click and drag that to the left here, somewhere around 38% or so. And this black one, I'll move it all the way to the other side here to about here, maybe 97%, 96, somewhere around there. Then press OK, and we're going to set the style to radial. And we're going to press OK. And that's going to create this shadow inside of the texture, making it look rounder and sort of as it's sticking up, sort of like a shield, of course. And I'm going to delete the layer mask here since we don't need it, and I don't want everything to be cluttered. As I said before, we're going to have a whole bunch of layers, so I'm just going to try to keep things clean and simple. I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to call this layer Lower Highlight. And I'm going to grab my brush tool, and I'm going to select a soft brush. So we'll just start with this one here. And right now it's set to 900 pixels, but I'm going to bring that down to, let's make it 375. And I'm just going to click here in the middle with a color that I've already predetermined, which is 85756F, which is that brownish color right there. Press OK. And I'm just going to click in the center once, like so. Then I'm going to make the brush smaller by using the bracket keys, and 175 should be okay. And I'll press the D key to bring my default colors to black and white, and press X to swap those, so white is the foreground color. And I'm just going to click once on there to create that highlight. Then I'm going to go into Edit and Fade to fade that highlight a little bit. So I might have been a little too strong. So 62% or so should be okay. So something that looks like that. Press OK. I'm going to press V on the keyboard to select my move tool and click and drag that to the side, somewhere along here, and that's going to be one of the highlights in the shield. And if this is too strong, you can always bring down the opacity. It's up to you. In my case, maybe like 95%, 96, something like that should work. I'm going to open up another texture. So I'm going to go to File, Open, and I'm going to click on this texture called Radio Grunge. And we're going to be using this to create the texture for our shield. What we want to do is have this texture go around it in a circle, sort of like brush metal. So if we go to Filter, Distort, Polar Coordinates, and select Rectangular or Polar, we get this effect here. It does create something that looks like a shield, but the texture's all going in, pointing towards the middle. And that's not what we want. We want things to go around in a circle. So I'm going to press Ctrl-Alt-Z to undo. And I'm going to go to Image Rotation, 90 degrees clockwise. Now the texture's going horizontally as opposed to vertically. So if we go into Filter, Distort, Polar Coordinates, and select Rectangular to Polar, press OK. Now the texture goes around in a circle, much like we want it to. But we have one more problem. We have this seam here that could be distracting in the final texture that we're going to be using. So I'm going to press Ctrl-Z, and I'm going to show you how to fix that. We're going to go into Filter, Other, Offset, and we're going to offset the image. So by default, it'll be on 0, and you can click and drag to move the texture around and see where the seam is. So we see the seam here, and by the way, you can do that vertically as well, but we're not going to need it for this tutorial. So I'm just going to leave that at 0. The number here doesn't really matter as long as you can see the seam. So find the seam and try to get it as close as you can to the center. So something like that. It doesn't need to be perfect. Press OK. Then I'm going to click on the Spot Healing Brush tool. I'm going to make that a little bit bigger, and I'm just going to click and drag down like so. And you'll notice that gets rid of the seam. So if we go into Filter, Distort, Polar Coordinates once again, and do the Rectangular to Polar, press OK, we get the same texture but no seam. So that's what we want. So we're going to be creating the texture out of this image here, but we're going to be using the channels to do that. So open up your channels panel, and if you don't see that, go into Windows, make sure that channels has a check mark next to it. And I've already gone ahead and created what I wanted to do, which is this texture here, but I'm just going to go ahead and delete it and show you how I came up with that. So select a channel, usually the one that has more contrast, in this case the blue channel. So I'm going to click on it and drag it into the new channel icon. Then I'm going to press Ctrl-I to invert, because everything that's dark is actually part of the texture. So I want to keep the darks here, not the lights, which is why I'm going to invert. So I'm going to click on the blue copy, press Ctrl-I to invert. Then I'm going to click on the elliptical marquee tool, click from the center, hold Alt and Shift, and I don't have to go all the way to the edges. As long as I get a nice circle around the texture, right click on it, select Inverse, fill that with black by holding Alt and Backspace. That's Option and Backspace on the Mac, and you get this result here. Then I'm going to click on the Burn tool, and I'm just going to burn around the edges like so, just to even out the edges a little bit, maybe a little bit in the center. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Image, Adjustment, Levels, and I'm going to bring in the darks and bring in the lights like so. Then press OK. Maybe a little bit darker in the middle. And things are looking pretty good, but you know what? I think I might need a little more black. So I'm going to bring the black in maybe here, like so. And I'm going to zoom in just so I could see. There might be too much gray, but I think this will work. So I'm going to zoom out, and we'll just work with this. I'm going to Control click on the layer mask, and that's of course Command click on the Mac. I'm going to go back into the Layers panel, add a new layer, and fill that layer with black. So I'm going to press Control Backspace to fill with my background color. That's Command Backspace on the Mac. And just so you can see what we did, I'm just going to fill this original layer with white. So I'm going to press Control D, Command D to deselect, Alt Backspace, Option Backspace. So this is what the texture looks like. So we can lay it on top of anything we want and it'll blend really nicely. So I'm going to click on this layer, click on the move tool, click and drag that over onto our working composition, hold shift so it drops it dead in the center. I'm going to turn that into a smart object by right clicking on it and select convert to smart object, and I'm going to rename that radial texture. Then I'm going to press Ctrl T to transform, and I'm going to scale that in right about there. Press enter. I'm going to change the opacity, and I'm going to just bring that down to 95%. I'm going to double click on the layer to bring up the layer style options, and I'm going to change the blend diff, actually the white blend diff, to 124. 125 should work, and maybe 157 or so, 160. We'll just go 125, 160. And by the way, you can click and drag on these sliders here, and you see how the texture is affected. So this affects the dark pixels, and these, of course, change the white pixels. If you want to split these to have a smoother transition, hold Alt or Option on the Mac, and you split those and have smoother transitions. So you see the transition here at the bottom with the blacks. But if I have those together, notice how much rougher that transition is. So split them and you'll have smoother transitions. But I'm just going to need the transitions on the white, not the black. So I'll leave the blacks as they are. Then I'm going to press OK. And I'm going to zoom in a little bit just so we can see what's going on. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, maybe we need more of a transition here. It's okay if the dark areas of the shield are darker, but I'm just trying not to have this center part too dark, something like that. So the numbers might not be important. You might have to eyeball it and see what works for your image, but you know, something like that will work. And actually the opacity, I'll bring that down maybe even to like 80%. And I'm going to duplicate this layer by pressing Ctrl J, that's Command J on the Mac. And I'm going to add a layer mask, and I'm going to set my foreground color to black and my background color to white. Go into Filter, Render, Clouds, and it's going to create this layer mask, and I'll show you what that looks like. Creates this layer mask here, and it applies it to the grunge, so it darkens up some areas but not all areas. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the brush tool, I'm going to increase the size of it, and I'm just going to delete some of the pixels here in the top part because we're going to have a highlight, so we don't want this area to be too dark. And I'm also going to click and paint away some of the pixels here at the bottom, but I'm going to do a fade, so to not completely get rid of them, just make them be just a little less strong. Then I'm going to Control click on the layer here to make a selection out of the texture, and I'm going to click on the new solid color to make a fill with white to create this effect you see here. I'm going to bring the opacity down to maybe 20 or so percent and zoom out and see the entire thing. And I'm going to press Ctrl T to transform, and I'm going to rotate it just a little bit just so we can have different textures here. So we have the black and we have the white as well. And actually, now that I see this, I might want to actually bump this up to maybe 95%, something like that. Yeah, just makes it a little bit darker on the sides. So now we have the white texture here, and we have the dark one right below it. So I'm going to press Fit to Screen just so we can see how everything is looking so far. So I'm going to collapse this folder here, and I'm going to create 3 ellipses that are going to represent the other shapes of the shield. So I'm going to go into my ellipse tool, click and drag from the middle once again, holding Alt and Shift as we did before. And this time I'm going to create an ellipse that's 1025. So that's a 1028. As I said before, I can just come in here and press 1025, press enter, and it'll fix it for me. And the color really doesn't matter, but I'm just going to change the color just so you can see how this works. So for this one, I don't know, maybe a yellow or something like that. do the same thing, Alt Shift, and this time we're going to create an ellipse at 760 pixels. So that one's perfect, 760, and again we'll change the color. I don't know, we'll make that one gray, and we'll do one more, Alt Shift, and that's Option Shift on the Mac, and make this one 470. 472, let's just change this 2 to a 0, press enter, and there we go, and this one could be blue. Alright, so as you can see, this is already taking shape, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to create some folders. These folders are going to represent the shield, and I'm going to create them now because it's just going to make things easier for us. I'm just going to create a new folder, and I'm going to call this folder gold. And this is going to be that golden part of the shield. So I'm going to change the color to yellow just so we can differentiate it, and I'm going to control click on this first ellipse we just created so it selects this part, and I'm going to click on the layer mask icon while selecting the gold folder. So it's going to create a layer mask around that. Then I'm going to click on this second ellipse to select this gray circle here. Click on the gold layer mask and fill that with black. I'm going to hold Alt and backspace. That's Option backspace on the Mac. So I'm going to hold Alt and click on the layer mask so you can see what I did. So I'm going to deselect that, Control D. So this is the layer mask in that gold folder. So if you click Alt or Option on the layer mask, you can actually see the layer mask. I'm going to do one more folder, and I'm going to call this folder blue. In this folder, obviously I'm going to change this color to blue, and I only want a selection around that blue part there, so make a selection around that circle, click on the layer mask icon, and that's our selection for that. And I'm going to create another folder, and this folder is going to be called red, and this is going to be for the rings that have red on it, so the outer gray and this inner gray here. So I'll make that red as well, and what I'll do is I'll control click on the layer mask for the gold layer here, hold Alt or Option on the Mac, and click on this icon here so it hides anything that's going to go over that yellow ring. But then I can click on the gray layer mask, do a select inverse by right clicking on it with the marquee tool, and I can fill that with black. And I'm going to click on the blue ellipse here, and I'm going to fill that with black as well, all in the red layer mask. So if I hold Alt, Option, click on it, this is the final layer mask. It looks like a lot like the Target logo. So I'm going to enable the layer mask again. So these are just some of the folders that I'm going to need, and the only reason I created them now is because it's easier to create them now that I have these shapes, since I'm going to put them all into a smart object and it won't be as easy to select them once we do that. So now that I have these created, I'm going to go back into the first shape here, and I'm going to set the fill on all these guys to 0%, and I'm going to double click on the layer, add a stroke, a black stroke of 3 pixels, press OK, and I'm going to hold Alt, Option on the Mac, click and drag on the FX icon and drop it on the other ellipses to add the same layer style to those. Now that I have these lines here, I need to get the lines that are going to represent the star. So I'm going to go to File and Open, and I have this star file already created. So the first shape we're going to be using is the one in this layer called star, and all I did is created this star using the pen tool, just by clicking and dragging, clicking around and doing something of this sort, obviously with a little more time and better drawn, but that's essentially what I did. So using the pen tool I created this star. So I'm going to click on the move tool, click and drag that over onto our composition and just place that in the center. I'm going to zoom in a little bit by holding Alt and using the mouse wheel, that's Option on the Mac, and I'm going to press Control T to transform, Command T, and I'm just going to fit that star onto this circle as best as I can. If these lines, the guides and the transform box are bothering you, just press Control H to hide, Command H on the Mac, and you can just use the arrow to move that around. I'm going to press Control H once again to bring back the extras just so I could see where the bounding box is and I can move it around. So something like that, and I think that'll work. So I'm also going to hold Alt on the FX icon of one of the ellipses and bring that over into the star and set the fill to 0. So now we have the lines that are going to create the shape of the shield. So I'm actually going to put the star at the very top, and I'm going to select them all and right click on them and press and select convert to smart object, so they're all in one smart object. And actually I just thought about something. The star here has a 3 pixel stroke. We actually need 1 pixel on that, so I'm just going to double click on that, find the star, which is here, double click on it and change the stroke just to 1 pixel. That's all the star really needs, and you'll see why in a moment. I'm just going to close it and I will save it, and this is what it looks like. I'm going to double click on the smart object here to bring up the layer styles, and I'm going to add a bevel and emboss and check contour. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a pillow emboss. The depth is going to be 113 or so, and size will go for 13. And I don't want to use the global light, so I'm just going to uncheck that, and I'm going to do -117 and an angle of 42 here. So you get that result there. I'm just going to bring the screen, I'm just going to bring the highlights and the shadows up so they're much more prominent. Then I'm going to press OK. I'm going to collapse that. I'm going to press Control J to duplicate, and I'm just going to double click on the bevel and emboss here to bring the layer style back up, and I'm just going to turn that off, and I'm going to add a 1 pixel stroke to the duplicated smart object here. So just press OK, and just to keep things clean, this bevel and emboss, I'm going to hold Alt, click and drag on it, and throw that away. So we just have the stroke here. So you can see if I disable this, you can actually zoom in so you can see better. If I add a stroke, it just makes things a little darker, makes things seem a little bit deeper. So that's what I was going for. And by the way, this layer here says star. We'll just rename that to inner shape. And we can also call this one inner shape, and then we'll leave the copy there, I guess. Inner shape, just so we know what's going on. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on this star PSD, and now we're going to be working with the inner star shapes. So I'm going to click on that. With the move tool, I'm going to click and drag it over onto the tab of the composition we're working on, and I'm just going to drop them on to the composition. I'm going to zoom in, and I'm just going to place this in the center, and the center, oops, sorry about that, and the center is right here, right where all these points meet, and that's where our guides meet as well. So if things don't match up, because they're not really matching up down here, you can just cheat a little bit and move them to wherever you think they look better. So maybe they're maybe not dead in the center, but off to the top a little bit. Looks like it'll work better for my image at least. So I'm gonna zoom out just so we can see that better. So I'm gonna click on the inner star shapes, bring the fill all the way to 0, double click on it to create a layer style, click on bevel and emboss and contour, and what we're gonna have here is an inner bevel of 50%. We'll go 52. 52, we want size of 0, soften 0, and the angle, we're not going to use the global light, we're going to use 39 and 16. And we're going to bring the opacity of the highlight and shadow all the way up, like so. Then I'm going to press OK. So now if I zoom in, and you know what, things are not looking so good, and that's probably because the original stroke is not as thick. So why don't we make the strokes a little bit thicker? So I'm going to click on the inner shape smart object, press OK, and I'm just going to click here and just add a stroke. And we'll make it just 1 pixel. Press OK, And I'll do the same thing for this star here. It's already at 1 pixel, so maybe we can set that to 2. We'll try 3 pixels. I'm going to press Control S to save, and I'm going to go back into our composition, and yeah, that's looking much better. You can see the grooves of the star much better by doing that. What I'm going to do now is, actually, let me just close this tab since we won't need it anymore, and we won't need this star tab anymore. And I don't think we'll need any of these other layers, but we'll just leave them there for now. So now that I have this inner shape completed, we need to fix something. Notice that this part here, right here, the indentation doesn't look right. So let's fix that. I'm going to press Control J to duplicate. I'm going to disable the original layer just so we can see that better. I'm going to double click on the layer style icon. I'm going to click on bevel and emboss, and what I'm going to do now is I'm going to change the angle to 138 and 21, like so. So now we have this sharp line here at the bottom. I'm going to press OK, and I'm going to add a layer mask, but I'm going to hold Alt Option on the Mac and then click on it to fill it with black so it makes everything invisible. So I'm going to enable the original layer. I'm going to press B on my keyboard for a brush, and I'm going to make that brush much smaller, and I'm going to paint with white in that area here to bring that line back, like so. So now it looks a little bit more filled up than it originally was, so we'll leave that as it is. And if it's too strong, you can bring that down. I probably will. Maybe, I don't know, maybe 42%. And I'm just going to zoom out so we can see everything. And things are looking pretty good. So I'm going to take these shape layers and I'm going to put them all into a folder. So I'm going to select them all and I'm going to press Control G to make them into a folder, and I'm just going to call that folder Shapes, and the color will change to violet. So we have this violet folder here, and I'm going to click and drag that all the way to the top. So the Shapes folder would be at the very top. So now let's work in this gold folder that we created. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to create a solid, and I'm going to fill this solid with a color, which is 857F6B, which is this brownish color you see here. And I'm going to put that in the gold folder so it only affects this ring there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this fill layer we created, and we're going to set the blending mode to overlay, and I'm going to add a curves adjustment layer, and I'm going to make this window just a little bit bigger so you can see it. I'm going to click and drag from the bottom here, and I'm just going to create a contrast layer here, and by making this S curve you see here. Okay, and now that I have this adjustment layer created, I'm noticing that the texture here is a little too dark, so I'm going to go find that texture. And I think is this texture, actually this texture here. Yeah, it's a little bit too dark, so I'm going to bring the opacity down even further. So maybe something like 55% or so. It was just way too dark earlier, so I just brought the opacity down just a little bit. Okay, so we're working in the gold folder. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take the radial texture, which is this texture there, and I'm going to create a fill out of that layer, and I'm going to just create solid color. And the color that I want is 0A0907, which is this dark brown color here. And I'm going to duplicate it by pressing Control J, and I'm just going to go to Edit, Transform, Rotate Clockwise 90 degrees, and I'm going to change the opacity to 50%. I'm going to duplicate that, press Control J again, and I will do the same thing, Edit, Transform, Clockwise. This time the opacity will be 25%. So now I have this texture you see here. I'm going to select all the 3 fills and take them and place them into one smart object. So now I have this smart object you see here. I'm going to add a layer mask, and I'm going to zoom out just so we can see what's going on. And I'm going to select a brush, soft brush, and something pretty big, something that covers a large portion of the shield, and that's probably good enough. And I'm just gonna with black, I'm just gonna hide the part up here where the highlight's gonna be, and I'm gonna just bring the opacity down on this just a little bit, maybe 60%, 65% or so, something like that. What we're going to do now is we're going to create the brush metal look that's going to be in the top here and a little bit on the bottom. And to do that, I'm going to create a new file. So I'm going to go to File, New. The width and height will be 1600, so a perfect square. Something big. And with black and white as my foreground and background color, I'm going to go into Filter, Render, Fibers. And I'm just going to bump the variance all the way up and the strength all the way up to 64. Press OK. And then I'm going to go into Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, and we're going to do a blur of 90 degrees. So let me type that in, 90, and press OK. So we're going to have something like that, and maybe we'll do that just a few more times. And to repeat the last filter that you did, you can just press Control F. So I'll do that a few more times. Control F, Control F, Control F. Just just so it's straight on. And what I'm going to do now is go to image rotation 90 degrees clockwise, and I'm going to go into Filter, Other, Offset, just so we can get rid of the seam there. But we have to do it with a selection. So I'm going to select the rectangular marquee tool, make a selection about that big, go into Filter, Blur, Motion Blur, 0%, press OK, and it gets rid of that seam, as you can see there. So I can go into Filter, Distort, Polar Coordinates, Rectangular to Polar, and press OK, and now we have these white lines. Now you might see the distortion here in these areas. Well, that's easy to fix. You can go to Filter, Blur, Radial Blur, amount of 10, spin, best, press OK, and it'll get rid of those lines, and we still have some nice radial lines here. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to Image, Adjustment, and I'm just going to bring the darks in, the lights in, because I want the lines to be visible, but I don't want too much of the gray because I just want to see the lines, like so. So I'm going to press OK, and I might do one more radial blur just to get rid of some weird edges I see here. So I think this should work. I'm going to zoom in just so I can see. And yeah, I see black, white, and some grays. Maybe I want to add just a little bit more white and get rid of some of the gray. So maybe like that. And what I can do now is I'm gonna do an elliptical marquee tool selection, select inverse, and fill with black, just because I really want the outside to be black and not gray. So I'm gonna go into the channels, do what I did before, and actually I don't even need to make a duplicate of this channel. I can just control click on it. It'll make a selection out of the light pixels. In this new layer, I can create in the layers panel, I can create a new layer, fill that with white, and I can take that new layer into my composition. Just drop it right there, right in the middle. Actually, I can move it to the center here. If I press Control T, I'll see where the center point is, and I'll match it to my canvas here. And I'll make that into a smart object. I'll name this brush texture. And I'll press Control T. Oops, sorry, I need to accept the name. Press Control T, and I'm going to scale that down to fit right on this area here. And you know what, this part right here is really white. I think I could use that on the top here, so I'm just gonna spin that around. So this should be a good spot for that. And I'm gonna add a layer mask, and I'm gonna do render clouds with black and white as my foreground and background color. So go into render clouds like so. And then this part here, I want this part lighter, so I'm gonna select a brush, use white, and just paint on it like so. So if I zoom in, you'll see what that looks like. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to press Ctrl J to duplicate this layer here, and I'm going to double click on that layer to bring the layer style options, and I'm going to add a color overlay of black. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the layer mask, and I'll bring that down just so you can see what's going on. I'm going to click on that layer mask, and I'm going to press Control I, that's Command I on the Mac, to invert. And what that does is it creates these black lines that you sort of can see if I turn that back on. So it just helps create these darker lines. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to move the layer 1 pixel down and 1 to the left, just so it's not exactly the same as the layer above it, and we can see more of those dark lines. Okay, and actually I'll zoom in here. I'm not really happy with these lines, so I might adjust them later on, but for now I'll leave them as they are. We'll see how it looks when we get closer to finishing up this tutorial. One thing that I didn't do earlier that I probably should do now is this star here in the center needs to have the same texture and color that we're applying to this gold folder. So what I could do is I could just zoom in, click on the layer mask icon for the gold layer here. With the polygonal lasso tool, I can just easily trace this star here. And fill that with white, and we get that result you see there. Now, this star has a lot of that brush metal texture. With the brush tool, I'm just going to hide a lot of it. So I'm just going to go and remove it. I'm going to do a fade, because I still want a little bit, but I don't want it to be too noticeable. So maybe something like that where you can barely see it, and press OK. And now that we're here, I'm just going to click on the top layer here and create a new ellipse, and it's going to be the same size as that inner circle here. And I'm going to use the space bar to move as I'm drawing it, just to try to match it as best as I can. So I'm just going to come down, and it looks like I didn't do a good job tracing it because it's smaller, so I'm just going to scale it so it's just as big as that circle is, so something like that. And I'm just going to bring the opacity all the way down. I'm going to double click on the layer, and I'm going to add a gradient overlay. And what I'm looking for is a radial overlay. Click on reverse, and oops, click and drag on that highlight, and that's more or less what I'm looking for there. So I'm just going to set this to multiply and bring the opacity down. So maybe something like that, and actually maybe I need more of this highlight to really see how that works there. So press OK, and Control H to hide the extras, just so we can see what's going on there. So that's looking pretty good. Okay, so we're going to work with this blue folder now, and I'm going to add a solid, and the color we're looking for is 293A51, which is this blue here. I'm going to set the blending mode to overlay, which is going to create that there. But you know what? There's a problem. It's affecting the star. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to control click or command click, and on the blue layer mask, I'm just going to paint with black here within the star, like so. Press Ctrl D to deselect, and this is what the layer mask for the blue folder looks like. So now the blue only affects this background here. And in this blue layer, like I've been doing before, I'm just going to delete the layer mask since it creates clutter and I don't need it. I'm going to add a new layer, and I'm going to set the foreground color to 50% gray and the background black. I'm going to go into filter, render clouds, and I'm going to set that layer to overlay. And I'm going to go and find that brush metal texture we created, which is this one here. I'm going to press Ctrl J to duplicate, and I'm going to bring that up to the blue folder, put it on top there, and I'll change the color just so we keep things consistent, so make it blue. I'm going to right click on the layer and delete the layer mask. We'll worry about the layer mask later. So I'm going to click on the move tool, press Ctrl T to transform, and I'm going to scale that in probably around there. And I'm going to change the blending mode to soft light, and if I zoom in, you'll see the results. You can barely see the white lines there, and that's okay. That's sort of what we're going for. If you need them to be brighter, just duplicate the layer, and you can always add a layer mask and do the whole clouds layer mask technique. So we'll do that. I think that'll work good on this particular image. So we'll keep that there. We'll copy the original brush layer here, and we'll double click on it. We'll add a color overlay. We'll set that to black, and we'll press Ctrl T to transform, and we'll scale that in just a little bit, and we'll rotate it as well, just so it's different than the other one. And we'll set the blending mode to normal. So now you have this look here. I'm going to add one more new layer. With the brush tool selected, I'm going to select it by pressing B, by the way. I'm going to make that bigger by using the bracket keys, set the foreground color to white, and I'm just going to create a highlight right there, like so. And I'm going to set that to overlay. And actually I'm going to create one more layer, and I'm going to create another highlight. I'm going to set it to overlay as well. This time I'm going to add a layer mask and do the clouds, so the highlight has a little more texture, so something like that. And that's a nice little highlight there, I think. Okay, so we're going to create a new layer above this blue layer, and I'm going to call this layer scratches. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a brush, this 1 pixel, and I'm just going to click and make scratches all along this image. And I'm going to go ahead and pause the video so I can take my time doing it, and I'll come back when I'm done. Okay, so I've gone ahead and added the scratches to my shield, and I converted it to a smart object. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to add a blur to this smart object. So I'm going to go into Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, and I'm going to add a Gaussian blur of just 1 pixel. So add 1 and press OK. And I'm going to do what I've been doing before. I'm going to add a layer mask, go into Filter, Render, Clouds, and I'm going to do a blend if. So I'm going to double click on the layer to create the layer style, and I'm going to do a blend if for the darks. So we'll do 15 and 45. When you're done, just press OK, and this is the result you see here. You see some scratches around your shield, and now we're going to create a shadow for this shield. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to click on this gray layer mask icon to make a selection around the shield. Right above the scratches layer, I'm going to create a new solid, and I'm going to fill that solid with black, and the blending mode for that solid will be overlay, and I'm going to set this to 35%, and I'm going to grab a brush. I'm going to have a big soft brush and just remove the black from the top part. So this is the layer mask I created. It sort of looks like a moon, so that's the highlight there. I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to select this spatter brush, which is this one right here. If you hover over it, you'll see that it's called spatter 27 pixels. So I'm going to select that, and I'm going to increase the size of that brush, and I'll make it about 150 pixels or so. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to create the highlight for the shield. So I'm just going to start painting this area here, like so. and this part here. And this part here in the middle can be all white. That's okay. And maybe add a little bit to that. Okay, so now that I've created that, I can do radial blur. So I'm going to go into Filter, Blur, Radial Blur, set it to 10, and I'll do one more. So that's going to be my highlight there. Now I'm going to duplicate the layer by pressing Ctrl J and making the blending mode overlay. And I'm going to set the opacity to 60%, and I'm going to do one more radial blur just to make that a little bit bigger. Then I'm going to duplicate this layer I just created by pressing Ctrl J and adding one more radial blur, but this time I'm going to set the blending mode back to soft light. And I guess I can bring the opacity back to 100%. So this is what my highlight looks like. I'm going to add all these layers, and actually I think while I was creating these, I didn't change the blending mode to soft light on this first one, so I was kind of worried because things were looking a little bit weird. But anyway, so the first layer here is soft light, the second one's overlay at 60%. The one after that, actually we have an extra one. That's what happened. I created an extra one, so I'll delete that. So we should have only 3 layers. So the first one is soft light at 100%, the next one is overlay at 60%, and the one after that is soft light at 100%, and we create this highlight you see here. So I'm going to select all these layers and just put them into a group. So I'm going to press Ctrl G, and I'm going to call this group highlight, and I can change the color, and we'll make this color orange. And I'm going to add a layer mask to that folder, and if I need to, I can come in here and fix some areas of this highlight that might be too prominent, so something like that. And then I can do a radial blur as well. So it just keeps things more realistic. And actually, you know what, I'm going to select the soft brush, and in the middle here, it's just too bright for me, so I'm just going to paint it away with black and then fade it to about 52% and press OK. Okay, now that we have the highlight created, we're going to be working on the red folder here, and this is the folder that's going to contain the red paint in the shield. So we need to add a gradient overlay. So I'm going to go into gradient, double click on that to bring up the gradient editor, and this needs to be opacity 100%. This is a darker red color, so I'm going to set that to 7E140F, and I'm going to set this to E13A46. Press OK, and I'm going to change the locations on both of these. The location on this one is going to be at 21 or so percent, 20 is fine, and bring that over to around 85 or so. So right there is fine. Press OK, and we're going to set the angle of this to maybe 54. So the lighter side is on top here and the darker side is at the bottom. I'm going to call this layer red paint. Then I'm going to double click on the layer to create a layer style, and I'm going to add an inner shadow, and the inner shadow will be opacity of 40%, and maybe we'll set the distance to 2 and the size to 0. And I'm also going to add a pattern overlay, and we're going to change the pattern. And right now we're going to use, and by the way, you might not have these patterns here, so let me show you how to get there. Go into Artist Surfaces. You can either append it or press OK, it's up to you. And we're going to select the one that's titled Wash Watercolor Paper. We're going to set the blending mode to multiply, the opacity to 78%, and we'll just leave the scale at 100 and then press OK. Now I'm going to click on the layer mask of this layer here, this gradient layer, press Ctrl I to invert to hide the texture. So now I'm going to select my brush tool, go back into that splatter 27 brush I was using before, and if I paint with white, I can start painting in some of that paint like so, and I can make it look as if it were paint that was coming off the shield. So I'm going to take a few minutes and I'm going to finish that up, and I'm going to pause the video. That way I don't waste any of your time, and essentially what I'm going to be doing is what you just saw me do here. So I'll come right back to you. Okay, I'm back. I've gone ahead and created the red paint, and this is my result. One thing I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the layer here and bring up my blend if options, and I'm just going to click and drag that and put that right here about 18, just so the pixels that are completely dark are not covered by the red paint. Then I'm going to press OK. And I'm looking at this now, and I'm noticing that there's something not right. The highlights are not looking right, so I'm going to go ahead and fix that right now. And the problem, all it is on my inner shape here, this one here. Actually, oops, sorry about that, the one right below that, this one here. My bevel and emboss is pointing up. I want it to point down, so it makes it more like the shield effect that we're going for. So sorry about that. We just gotta fix that up, and you can see how that makes it look much nicer. So now we have our red paint, our highlight, and things are looking really good. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to open up one more file. So file, open, and I'm going to open this one called color. And this is just a file I created just with different colors, and all I did was with the brush tool I started painting with different colors, and I started doing some blurs, and ultimately I ended up with something that looks like that. And this is just going to be the color of our shield. If this shield were reflecting in the real world, you would see different colors. So I want to add some of these colors onto the shield. So I'm going to click on this layer, click and drag that over to our shield, and right below the at the very top, actually, I'm just going to set this to color, so it gives that color to our shield. But I'm going to bring the opacity down to maybe 70%, and I'm going to do a blend if, and I'm going to do blend ifs on both white and black. So I'll probably do 13 there, and then maybe something bigger, something like, I don't know, 83, and then I'll do 241, and I don't know, something like that, just so the color's barely noticeable. I'll press OK, and I'm going to add a layer mask and do what we've been doing before, which is a render clouds, so the color is not so obvious. And I'm going to click on the gold layer mask here, and I'm going to hold shift and backspace and fill with black to completely remove the color off of that. Then I can do a fade of 50% and then press OK. So this is the layer mask there. I'm going to press Control D to deselect, Command D on the Mac. So this is what the color does to that, and if I zoom in, you'll really be able to see some of the colors here and down here, like so. Then maybe some up here too. I don't know how well that would show in the video, but if you follow along, you'll be able to see the details. From this point, I would suggest just going into and then making some changes. Maybe I would need some more of that rough texture around this part of the shield, so I could find that wherever that is. It's probably here. So maybe duplicate that, and then maybe make a layer mask that hides everything and only add some of the texture to the areas that I think need work. Maybe I can fade that. But anyway, you can do that on your own. Just go ahead and find the areas that need more work. And you know what? I just noticed another little hiccup that I had while I was creating this. If I go back into the shapes, you'll see this star here. Yeah, that one there. The bevel and emboss is up. It should be pointing down. and I'll do that for the layer right above that. So bevel and emboss down. So essentially at the end, what you want to do is just go ahead and find whatever mistakes you've had and try to fix them, or maybe add some details and work on improving the shadows and highlights. As much as I like to show you every single step of any given project, sometimes I can't do that. It just takes time and trial and error to get your project to the next level. Here's an example of what I did with this very same file, only by adding one curves adjustment layer to create more shadows, and I also made a few small adjustments to the layers that were already on there. So continue to work on your image and feel free to share your results with me. I would love to see what you come up with. If you have any comments or questions, leave them down below. As you can see, I try to answer every comment that comes in. If you like this tutorial, don't forget to click the like button and share with your friends on Facebook, Twitter, Google+, or wherever you like to share your stuff. If you're at my website, don't forget to sign up for my free newsletter, where I email you subscriber-only tutorials, and I will also email you every time I put up a new tutorial. Thank you for watching. I'll talk to you again very soon.